Hi there, it's Nicole for Lawn Fawn with a holiday scene card featuring the new Winter Skies stamps and dies, as well as the amazing new portrait Snowfall die. There's also a landscape die, and I'm going to link to another card I did with these products at the end of the video, but I used the landscape Snowfall instead and did a pop-up style card. We're going to start with our portrait Snowfall background. I die cut this from regular Nina smooth white cardstock, and I'm going to ink up the sky to make it a night sky. And that way all those little die cut holes, when you layer this over a white card based background, are going to look like falling snow in a night sky. I'm inking this up with black soot and Faded Jeans Distress Oxide inks. They're blending great even on this Nina Smooth White cardstock. I'm not going to ink all the way to the end of the panel because that's going to be covered up with the Portrait Stitched Hillside backdrop, which was released last year. There's also the landscape version of this, but it's going to frame up our Snowfall background perfectly. Let's go ahead and adhere this to our card base. I'm going to put some adhesive at the bottom where it's not going to show, and then just some liquid adhesive at the top around all of those little die cut holes. I don't want to put a tape runner back behind those because sticky areas will show through, or you'll be able to feel those through, and they're going to pick up lint and dust and things like that. Around the Portrait Stitched Hillside backdrop, I like to use some 1/8 inch score tape. It works really well around those edges because they are pretty skinny. And once I have that kind of framed up here, I can pop that in place right over the Portrait Snowfall backdrop. I love being able to layer the different backdrop pieces to build really fun, beautiful scenes. Then we're going to stamp the images for our scene card. I am using images all from the new Winter Skies stamp set. I'm using the fox and raccoon that are kind of bundled there, or their tails are intertwined. They're both wearing cute little scarves. We're going to stamp multiple trees from the stamp set, multiple little stars, and then a couple of the snowflake images that you can color in. I stamped those as well. And that's what we're going to be using to create our scene, or to kind of finish off our scene. And then we'll be stamping and embossing some sentiments to finish it off. I'm using E11, 13, and 15 to color in my fox. There are the fox and raccoon image cuddled together like you see here. There's an individual raccoon, the back of him. Then there is a couple of polar bears cuddled up with a scarf around both of them. That's what I used for my other card, and an individual polar bear as well. So lots of critters. Very, very cute. This is a lot like the stamp set that was released a few months ago with the constellations and the critters sitting down staring up into them. Same kind of look. You can use the Santa and its sleigh up in the sky, so kind of like they're watching Santa go if you want to. I opted not to use that for this card. I did use it on the last one. But they're just kind of staring off into this snowy forest, watching the snowfall or whatever it might be. I just like the look of these little critters out in the snowy forest. Coloring in the trees with G82, 94, 99. The tree trunks are E55 and 57. And the tip of the fox's tail is E00 and 11. The scarf is going to be R35, 37, and 39. I decided to go with red for one and blue for the other. So for blues, I'm using B34, 37, and 99. deep dark blues. These blues actually match the Faded Jeans Distress Oxide ink really nicely, I think. For the raccoon, I'm using Warm Gray 3, 5, and 8, a combination of that for the entire critter. I went in pretty lightly with my Warm Gray 8, and I'll blend out with Warm Gray 5 and then eventually Warm Gray 3. I went over this several times to get my blending exactly the way I want. And of course, one darker stripe and then one lighter one for the tail there, since the rest of it's really covered up with the fox's tail. But I want it to be darker where the two animals kind of meet together. Adding some little dot detail with my darkest markers, Warm Gray 8 and E15. And then we've got some little stars, which I'm going to color with white or yellow red 31 and 23. And then the snowflakes are going to be a combination of BG 70 and blue green 72. Kind of a fun darker aqua color that I think complements the card nicely but gives it that icy feel. Then I die cut all of the images with the coordinating dies, and before I commit to actually adhering anything to my design, I like to lay everything out and make sure it's exactly where I want it. Plus I've got multiple trees to die cut with these dies, and you might notice there are more trees on the card than what I colored. I did go back and color one additional tree. I felt like I needed one more. I didn't want I didn't want 4 trees on one level and 2 on the other. I kind of like the idea of 4 and then 3. You can do whatever you want, fill it in as much as you want. Maybe grab some different trees and do a combination of trees. There's lots and lots of trees throughout the Lawn Fawn collection, especially the winter sets have tons and tons of great winter trees that I think you could mix and match really easily. The yellow stars are going to add a nice little different pop of color, just like the scarves do on the critters, because there's a lot of blues, there's a lot of neutrals, there's a lot of green, and so I'm trying to find ways to pull in a little bit of color. The stars are going to be a great color. We are going to stamp and emboss our sentiments on red cardstock to add a nice pop of color. And then add, of course, my favorite part of any card design is the finishing details that really make a card, especially a scene card, come to life. In order to give a little more depth and dimension to a fairly flat card, I'm going to adhere my critters with foam adhesive. I'm adhering my trees with some glue dots. They're pretty small. That was the easiest way. I usually tend to try to not use liquid adhesive if possible, just because I think it kind of is messy, or I'm messy with it. That's probably more accurate. So I try to use glue dots or tape runners or score tape, whatever, when possible. Once I attached my critters, I decided to adorn their scarves or give them some texture. So some white polka dots to the red scarf. And then we're going to do some glittery stripes to the blue with the Stardust pin. And I thought about using the white pin to add snow to the trees, but I think we're going to add some kind of textury snow with the Nuvo Crystal Drops in Gloss White. This is a really opaque white, and I'm just kind of messily drawing on some snow on the trees. Now I'm going to grab my Misty again and take sentiments from the Winter Skies stamp set and line them up in 2 lines of text, kind of really next to each other, not totally lined up or anything like that, just as straight as possible. Stamp those with the Lawn Fawn Clear Embossing ink, sprinkle on white embossing powder, and then we're going to trim these into thin strips that we can attach to the card with foam adhesive. I love adding a little dimension here and there where possible. This will also kind of draw your eye from the sentiment down to the critters, because they're all going to be attached with the foam adhesive. The white looks really nice embossed on red. I did this on another card for the September Inspiration Week for Lawn Fawn. Really liking the look of the stamped strips, stamped and embossed strips on red as opposed to maybe a more traditional black or gray. It's one of those creating type or technique things where your eye is going to be more drawn to the sentiment on red, and it complements a Christmas card, I think, really nicely, more than stamping it on black would have. While I still think that would have looked really nice, maybe even just stamping these with black ink on white cardstock and popping them up, that also would work great. But the red really ties in, and it helps break up where there's so much white going on this card. I think it kind of helps break that up, and it really adds a nice pop of color to the design. I also attached these not perfectly straight, and you could combine them in any way you wanted. I went ahead and left them each individual to kind of stack them and also fill the space. I have quite a bit of space up here, and that helps fill the space really nicely. But if you wanted to combine some of the phrases to make less lines of text, it's very easy to do that as well. Whatever you need to do to fit the design of your card. Next, I'm attaching my stars and snowflakes to the sky, just scattering them throughout. That's going to help fill in the rest of that space up at the top. And then we will add some finishing details with Nuvo crystal drops in White Blizzard, which is going to be sparkly. I added this to the snowflakes and stars as well as to the die cut holes in the sky. It's going to add glitter everywhere, which I really like. I originally wasn't going to do that. I was going to just leave it white, but I couldn't just leave it. I have done this a few times when using these Snowfall backdrops, and I really like the look. Instead of having to layer a glittery paper behind, which I actually did, the card I'm linking to at the end of the video, I layered glitter cardstock behind it, but you're kind of, I hate to say wasting all of that glitter paper, but it's only showing through those die cut holes, and I definitely don't want to inlay this kind of a background. That would be a lot of work. So just adding some sparkle Nuvo crystal drops to those little die cut holes is a really quick and easy way to add that sparkle without actually having to layer anything, which is really awesome. I want to make sure and fill in all of them that are showing. I also really like to wait and do this after I've attached anything that I'm going to attach over the background. That minimizes the amount of the product that you have to use to fill in. So it just saves you maybe a little bit of your Nuvo crystal drops. So anything that's behind the trees or the sentiments, I didn't cover with the glittery Nuvo crystal drops. Finally, I'm going to take a black pen, add detail to the noses of the critters, and then a white pen and add just a couple of highlights here and there. Not a ton, just a couple. And that is really going to finish up our Winter Skies and Snowfall backdrop card featuring new Lawn Fawn stamps and dies. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this holiday card featuring Lawn Fawn. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring Lawn Fawn stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.